Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. It is Thursday, June 14th, 2012. Here's a quick look at what we have lined up for you this evening. Tonight, it's the rise of the spy drones, as the FAA predicts 30,000 drones in operation in U.S. skies by 2020. Then, the U.S. expansion of secret intelligence operations in Africa unfolds. Plus a special report on the hidden dangers of nuclear technology. That's up next on the INFOWARS Nightly News. All that and more coming up during the next 30 minutes or so, but first, let's jump right into our top headlines as we begin this evening with a report from the Washington Post. As the U.S. expands secret intelligence operations in Africa, they are establishing a network of air bases to spy on terrorists. That's right, just terrorists. The operations have intensified in recent months as this is part of the growing shadow war against al-Qaeda affiliates, more like al-Qaeda affiliates and other militant groups. The surveillance is overseen by U.S. Special Operations Forces and private military contractors. No big surprise there. And of course, they are also there to train the African troops. And now they have spy drones to track down the boogeyman Kony, the infamous fugitive leader of the Lord's Resistance Army. So the militarization of Africa under the Obama administration escalates and expands throughout the continent. No big surprise there. I guess we didn't see that one coming, right? Now, speaking of drones, a U.S. congressman is demanding justification for U.S. drone strikes. In fact, 26 congressmen sent a letter to Barack Obama demanding a legal justification for the drone strikes. This was led by Congressman Dennis Kucinich, who says that the drone strikes could significantly increase risk of killing innocent civilians and those with no relationship to a potential attack on the U.S. Well, no kidding. The U.S. always says that they only target militants, but we all know by reading reports that the majority of people who get killed in these drone strikes are indeed civilians. That includes men, women, and children. Well, the move toward a cashless society has taken root in India, as smart cards have been introduced by none other than the World Bank. This to replace their cash system and help workers save money. The project has been going on since 2008. It requires fingerprint scans of all 10 fingers. This could very well be the prototype for the total cashless control grid that the globalists have been planning worldwide. And as you know, a couple weeks ago back in Chantilly, Virginia at the Bilderberg meeting, there was a couple that were paired up there. One was the head of the European Union's Digital Agenda Administrator is her title. That's Neelie Kroes. She was paired up with General Keith Alexander, and he's the head of the NSA and U.S. Cybercom. Together, they are developing ways to establish a mandatory electronic ID system, and this of course, this is in the name of internet security and safe commerce. So we have smart cards in India, no cash required, and soon in the U.S. and Europe, we have this mandatory electronic ID system, and this is their way to slowly implement the total cashless society control grid here. And it's also one step closer to, well, I'll just go ahead and say it, it's one step closer to the Mark of the Beast system. Now, we have an INFOWARS exclusive report uncovering the nuclear secrets of Austin, Texas, as dangerous experimentations in the continuity of government threatens our very way of life.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
From before the days of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the military-industrial complex has dominated research at universities across the United States.
We must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific technological elite in laboratories and testing fields. The Free University has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research.
There have been many disasters. In California in 1959, a large sodium reactor melted down, and many estimates show that it was over 70 times bigger than 3 Mile Island and similar in effect to Chernobyl. But Americans weren't told about it for decades later.
The reactor problem in July of 1959 involved partial core meltdown was not publicly acknowledged until decades later.
That's why it's important to look at all the secret and covert infrastructure across the United States, including Austin, Texas, the site of 3 different covert nuclear reactors, and reports of huge caches of radioactive waste being hidden in the community of Austin, Texas. This is similar to large stockpiles that have been found in California and other states. No one wants the waste in their community, so government and universities tend to hide it. Alex Jones here with a breaking first report on the underground infrastructure that literally infest Austin, Texas, and surrounding areas. Bioweapons, rail guns, secret cyclotron facilities exploding just a few days ago, and big underground nuclear plants, research facilities, some of the biggest research facilities in the country, right here in Austin, and almost no newspaper articles about it. The articles we found online by the Statesman and others have been removed. Wikipedia has had the record of it expunged. But my father, when he was going to the University of Texas in the late 60s and was in departments that had access to the downtown reactor, saw it himself, worked on it as part of his physics class. Then in the late 80s, they built new, larger reactors in North Austin. We're going to show you both of those. But in our investigation of these secretive infrastructures the Department of Defense is controlling right here in Austin, but also in many other cities around the country, we discovered that hiding right under our nose, our own Chris Oden's great-grandfather had been the head superintendent of all the facilities for the University of Texas in Austin, the biggest campus in the world, and that up until 1970 when he retired, he told his great-grandson and family, for that matter, that the huge underground cave system right outside Austin had been used as a secret dumping ground. So, Chris, here in our office, tell folks exactly what your grandfather told you that they stored in there and how big this cave system is.
My great-grandfather, Benny Ellis, had told me many times about a site on the western portion of Austin, what used to be the outside of the city limits, right off of Redbud Trail. I'd say just a couple of 100 yards south of where the dam is at the beginning of the Old Town Lake, Lady Bird Lake, whatever they call it. And he told me for many years they had dumped barrels of chemical waste, heavy chests and containers of metal waste that he knew to be radioactive. He described them as containers with biohazard labels, radioactive labels. He had the responsibility of controlling transportation, and so in many cases he was witness to such events.
And you said that your great-grandfather said that they would wall it off and that there were areas that were cemented, so they would put it back in crevices.
Over the years, even when looking at the cave entrance site, there are layers that are comprised of older concrete. You can see it's pitted and has aged, and then there have been newer installations where it's more polished, updated concrete. They've even disguised, or what I consider disguised, a portion of it as drainage for the entrance that goes underneath the cliff that's near it.
This is a big deal because we have this history, not just here, but in Russia, Japan, where they just store this stuff all over the place. They store it in warehouses illegally. Repeat what you told me on the radio earlier today about the fact that they started moving it out to Redbud because it had been in East Austin.
Yes, according to him, for many years they had been attempting to store wastes of many kind, dumping wastes of many kind, as well as simply storing heavy equipment used by the university out where what is today Dishfalk Field. It's a large baseball diamond. That part of Austin was East Austin, typically known for having a higher minority population. There was a lot of blowback from the community, and they, in turn, began to store it underground in those lesser-known facilities.
Hey, this is stored in the richest part of Austin now.
It was not at that time. It was city limits. There was very little development. It was country. It was at that time.
No, I've got friends that live out there, and there's old fishing shacks and things from the 30s and 40s, and that's all that was out there.
Right.
I mean, that was the countryside.
Exactly.
Now, before we get into the full report, that's just part one, because this just started developing yesterday. What's your overall view, and did your great-grandfather, who was the head of superintendent of facilities at UT for all those years, did you ever talk about the reactor underneath the presidential library?
He did describe what many had said was underneath the Robert Lee Memorial Building. He said that there was more activity going on under the ground than above the ground. The campus was enormous, and the tunnels were vast. They were able to do things like transfer library books from one building to another underground when weather wouldn't permit. He even described times when personnel would use underground corridors instead of traveling above ground.
And it's not just Austin, Texas. There is secret infrastructure in every major city. But even my grandfather and family that lived here in Austin talked about the old SAC base that's now our international airport, Bergstrom. And they admit that the Hilton Hotel out there is the big SAC command building, was that. And I've talked to family who's currently in the military who says, well, we can't talk about it, but yes, there's a big underground base there. There's railways connected to UT, the Capitol, and all the way out to Fort Hood, 60 miles away. I mean, it's amazing. The United States has spent more money than all other countries combined on defense, but also on COG, continuity of government. Can you imagine how big these underground bases are? I mean, I've been told it's just staggering, the whole giant secret government corporate infrastructure that's underground.
Despite the bedrock here, despite the manpower that would go into such a thing, I know I've been told of underground bases, even located at the Capitol, that were installed during the Cold War simply for bomb shelters.
Chris Oden, thank you for taking time out to talk with us today. We're going to get into the full report right now from you guys on the street yesterday, Aaron Dykes, yourself, and Rob Jacobson running camera. And we're going to have a part two next week. This rabbit hole goes very, very deep. The fact that most Austinites don't even know that bioweapons are being developed in Austin, that if they got out would kill over 90% of the people, things like mousepox, things like airborne Ebola. The fact that we've got an old reactor still operating, hidden underneath UT downtown, and then two up north, and you tell the average person and they laugh at you, and there's almost no news coverage. You have to go back to the 80s to even find Austin American Statesman articles on this. This is wild. So here's the report.
Aaron Dykes here for INFOWARS.com. We're here on the UT campus in downtown Austin to expose some of the secret infrastructure that goes on at universities. Right here in Austin, Texas, there are several nuclear facilities. One is reportedly underground this campus. There's another at the J.J. Pickle Research Facility, part of the larger Austin system, just a few miles north of downtown here in Austin, Texas. Now, I'm standing here with one of our newest production team members, Christopher Oden, and not only is he a long-term Austin resident, his grandfather used to be a superintendent right here on UT campus. Christopher, tell us what you know.
I do know that for a number of years, according to my great-grandfather, Benjamin Ellis, there was research conducted here that was not only kept